And we're live. My name is Andrew, the Citizen 7076, and with me is Brady, the War Hamster, as always. Welcome to the Constitutional Roundtable. We are glad that you are here, and if you're not here, well, you need to be here next time because this is going to be a fantastic show. And looks like we have another person popping in.
Let me guess. Douglas
The
V.
man,
Gibbs.
the myth, the legend. I think I butchered that, but anyway, Douglas V. Gibbs,
Yeah.
the constitutional
Good.
scholar and man of Dr. Pepper.
Yeah. Well, not today. I'm not feeling good, so we got the Gatorade Zero going.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, and then I had to get a collared shirt. I had to raid a bunch of Italian restaurants of their table covers to put together this shirt.
Hey,
He's shopping at the Jill Biden boutique.
Yeah. Hey, you got to have a sense of humor even when you don't feel good. And I
yeah,
actually am not going to an event I was planning on going to tonight due to not feeling good. But I have a presentation tomorrow night, so I'm trying to nurse myself enough so that I can do it still tomorrow night.
gotcha. Doug, do you notice anything different about me?
Yeah, you cut your beard. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, nice shirt.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
I'm
Uh,
working on it.
for mics and for backgrounds, it's gonna have to wait a minute, but we're working on it. We're getting there.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, the fact that you're doing it with a smile too is a good thing. So,
I'll tell you this. What I'd like to do is have you seen the Dave Ramsey show lately? Have you?
not recently. I used to listen every once in a while on the radio, but I've never been a huge listener.
So now it looks like one of those newsrooms, and I want to have that kind of set up eventually, and then have like cameras panning in and out, and having intro and outro music. I already got it picked.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to. It look kind of cheesy if I did it right
Well,
now.
I could put up a nice background, but I'm too tired and sick to put up my green screen. So,
Well, you're a scholar and you have books in the background, so that
yeah,
works.
true enough.
Anyway, all right. So for everybody that's joining us, they'll be joining us later. In 6 days, I believe it's Thanksgiving, and we had a request from our very own Douglas V. Gibbs to have a Thanksgiving themed show today. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that we ought to talk at least a little bit about the upcoming Thanksgiving. But Brady, I have a feeling, also wants to talk about something that might be a form of Thanksgiving for us called FTX. And might want to mention it because I'm thankful and it's very giving on a lot of things. And matter of fact, I was reading a couple of Epic Times articles about it before we got on the air. And plus, also, last night, I got a little bit of a rundown from Brady at the Carlsbad class about what's going on with the FTX situation. So I think that's something we ought to mention as well.
Okay. Well, how about let's start with the thing with Doug, what you wanted to talk about, and then we'll go from there and then see where the rabbit hole takes us. So
Where the rabbit hole takes us.
yeah, so with
You
Brady,
know, you give that kind of opportunity, you know, it can be dangerous.
that's fine. I like Danger.
Yeah.
Danger's my one of my names.
One of my middle names, yeah.
Because
Actually,
I got some fun rabbit trails. If we go that direction, I've got some good stuff today.
Well,
So
go ahead,
oh,
lay some stuff on us.
oh
I'm
no,
just
let's. Andrew wants you to start with the Thanksgiving. I'm anxious to hear it, and we'll see where the show goes.
All right, so you know it's interesting because when we talk about Thanksgiving and we think of Thanksgiving proclamations and the National Day of Thanksgiving, and a lot of people like to push Lincoln's proclamation. And states scheduled the Thanksgiving holiday based on their independent schedules back then, often at different times in other states. So it was President Lincoln actually responding to a request that the date be the same for throughout the country. And the women and the woman had been an advocate for a national day for Thanksgiving for like 15 years. Her name, Mrs. Hale, and Sarah Josepha Hale, 74-year-old magazine editor. And she wrote a letter to Lincoln on September 28th, 1863, urging him to have the day of our annual Thanksgiving made a national fixed Union festival. What she said, quote, "You may have observed that for some years past, there has been an increasing interest felt in our land, excuse me, to have the Thanksgiving held on the same day in all the states, it now needs a national recognition and authoritative fixation, only to become permanently an American custom and institution. Now, prior to Lincoln's proclamation that put it all on the same day, George Washington was the first president under the United States Constitution to proclaim a day of to proclaim a day of Thanksgiving, issuing his request on October 3rd, 1789, exactly 74 years before. Now, when it comes to the earliest Thanksgiving, the concept of Thanksgiving feast is not uniquely American. The Spanish colonies also had Thanksgiving ceremonies and meals as well. I hope I don't do this the whole time, but we'll see. And the colonists in the New World, the English, the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, anybody of European origin, they were deeply religious people. And they felt it necessary to give thanks to God for their survival, their prosperity, their new land. So the Pilgrims, who had plenty to be thankful for after a bunch of them had died after trying socialistic beginnings, and theirs is the story that is probably most publicized, perhaps with a little help from the 1861 push for a Thanksgiving holiday. But turkey was not the dominant item on the menu. Many people don't realize what was actually on the menu. Wild turkey may have been an item, but based on evidence, what was available at that first Thanksgiving: goose, duck, crane, swan, partridge, and believe it or not, I hate to say this, eagles. Other meats included venison and seal. Seafood was also a large part of the diet. The banquet also included cod, eel, clams, lobster. The corn, not originally an item favorable to the palates of the colonists, was off the cob, ground down into a mush, and made into bread that resembled pita bread. It was a 3-day banquet, and it was a celebration of survival as a result of good harvest and a free and dynamic economic arrangement, which today we call capitalism. But they were thanking God for their opportunity the fact that they survived, should I say, and their opportunity to have their Thanksgiving feast. And that's where it gets interesting, because if you watch some of the lefty programs and presentations today, they'll tell you, well, they were giving thanks to the Indians for helping them out. So no, this was thanks to God, the Almighty. And the Pilgrims, they were religious separatists who wound up landing way north of their intended target, or maybe it was intended to be in their unintended target, since they were separatists. God only knows. But since they were separatists, I like to tell people they landed way north, accidentally on purpose. But many people, as I believe, since they were separatists, being from Plymouth, England is where they had left England, they had purposely navigated north. But anyway, so the reason for the Pilgrims' journey in America was to seek religious freedom. They were persecuted in England, as the king had made it law that everyone be a member of the Church of England. To escape the tyranny, and after a short stint in Holland, they braved a treacherous crossing of the Atlantic Ocean that lasted 66 days. The Pilgrims established a village using a communal system. I mentioned that earlier.
Doug, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I've been taking that biblical citizenship course.
Yeah.
And the first of all, and I highly recommend it. I just forgot the guy's name who does it. You know exactly who I'm talking about.
Michael Haller.
Thank you. And then
I actually met him years and years, long before COVID.
Yeah, and who's the constitutionalist historian who's got the best book collection?
David Barton.
That's it, David Barton. Yeah.
Michael Haller and David Barton are the two gentlemen behind that program, and so I guarantee it's good. I haven't gone through it though.
It is good. We get the final week is this Sunday. But the first week they talked about the Pilgrims, and basically they were trying to get away from religious persecution, and they got caught escaping a couple of times and got locked up by the Brits. And the story is just
that's why it was brave that they went to Plymouth before they took off, rather than going straight from Holland. They kind of had to, and they had no money. They had to, get investors to give them money, because they couldn't even afford to do it.
Yeah, the story's far more heroic than I ever knew. I got to give
Right.
them a whole lot more credit. I mean, to basically pick up your entire families, have no idea where you're going,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just
And then you land in some place where there's no town, there's no markets. I mean, you're on your own. And unlike the other settlers who had supply ships coming in behind them and all that, these guys were totally on their own.
Yeah, I just want to interrupt this. The cojones and the faith of that group of people is just off the charts, and without them, we're not here. So.
Oh yeah, no,
I think
that's the reason why the Pilgrims are such an important part of our American history, and we need to place an emphasis. And now, as Christians, though, and I'm sure you'll learn this in class, getting back to the socialistic kind of beginning, it wasn't an atheistic kind of socialism like we see today. It was, hey, we're all Christians here. We all can trust each other, and Puritans tended to have communities that did this back in Europe, where they would have a kind of a centralized society where they work together in a communal manner. Communitarianism was common among Puritans. We're all Christians here. We can trust each other. So they used a communal system with a central dispensary for food and other items. And you're expected to work for the good of the community, the common good, and then you place into the central store all of everything that you labor, and you take from it. Originally, it was kind of like you take from what you needed. Then they realized that wasn't working, so they started limiting how much people could take. It needed, and as Christians, once again, they felt they could trust each other, and to put forth a good effort. And to be honest about what they took from essential stores for survival and to fall within the limits that were requested, and so on and so forth. And now the first winter there, after they had landed, because remember, they landed like November. So there was no time to really have crops and all that. And it was a brutal winter on all that. And they're trying to survive on basically what they had brought. And it was brutal. Most of the colonists remained aboard the ship. They didn't even want to be on land. And more than half of the new colonists died from exposure, scurvy, and outbreaks of contagious disease. So, meaning that less than half of the original colonists survived that first winter. On the Mayflower's among the Mayflower's original travelers that survived through that winter, life was difficult. Sick, hungry, psychologically devastated. I mean, think about the psychological devastation of taking on such a difficult journey, but you've got to because of what's behind you is not, religious persecution and so on and so forth. And then, over half your people die, and it's just devastating. Psychologically, it's devastating. In the spring, the colonists moved ashore, but they continued to maintain their collectivistic system of communal living. Days passed, and the Pilgrims were greeted in English by an Abenaki Indian. Several days later, as the story goes, he returned with another Native American, Squanto, a member of the Pawtuxet tribe, who had been kidnapped by an English sea captain and sold into slavery before escaping to London and returning to his homeland on an exploratory expedition. Squanto taught the Pilgrims, weakened by malnutrition and illness, how to grow corn, extract and use sap from maple trees, catch fish in the rivers, and avoid poisonous plants. And through the process, with Squanto's guidance, the colonists also formed an alliance with a local tribe. Now, the friendship lasted more than 50 years, and in a shining example of how the colonists and the Indians attempted to live in harmony in the New World. Now, when I talk about the Constitution, let me remind people, because we hear this all the time about the genocide of the Indians by the white man. And that was really the Spanish. The Spanish came here as conquerors. Cortez's exploits are well known. The destruction, the pillaging, and so on and so forth. When the English came, they didn't come as conquerors. They didn't come as a military force. They were families or investors. They were average folk. They didn't want to fight with the Indians. They needed help. And they were fighting for survival. They didn't desire war with the Indians like the conquistadors of the Spanish colonies who wiped out entire tribes had done. So the English colonies did not want to fight with the Indians, largely because they needed their help in order to survive, and that they were not there to create an empire. They were there to start a new life. So even after help from Squanto, starvation continued to rampage through the colony because under the communal system, not all the settlers were putting forth their best effort. Human nature. And this ties into, and I hate to take a little side trip here, but it really does tie into another thing we're going to talk about later. This ties into FTX. FTX, the Pilgrims, the beginning of this country, all of it ties into one thing: human nature. The question is, how do you resolve the problem? Do you resolve it by centralizing government and throwing out so many rules that nobody can hardly move? Or do we work on the culture? So, and human nature always is a problem. No matter how good the culture is, there's going to be elements in our society who take advantage. I mean, you look back at the history of railroads in America and shares being sold to pay off other debt that weren't really proper shares, and wound up losing money and almost collapsing companies and things like that. This is a history of what humanity does. Not condoning it, I'm recognizing that human nature is a primal component, primary component in the history of economics and money and survival and society. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
And there's a truism that power corrupts, and so I've been talking about ad nauseum that you centralize all the power and wealth in a few hands, you're going to get the corruption every single time.
Yeah,
and that's a big part of what we're looking at today.
Yeah, and that goes back even to our elections, where all the votes are counted in a central location, ROV, and then and rather than, and I've been talking about this lately because I want people to understand the key is always localism and decentralization. And even with our elections, if we were to have the ballots counted locally, then a record is made and then provided, then the numbers provided for the central location. Not everything is centralized. Now that central location then can put out the word. You have now a record behind it. You have a secondary record that can be checked against it. And what it creates is, to be honest with you, honesty. It's amazing what a check and balance system can do. So even when it comes to our elections, the key is to get back to decentralization and and localism. Now, even after help from Squanto, the starvation still continued to rampage through the colony because, once again, as I was saying earlier, not all the settlers are putting forth their best effort. Those that did work hard, got angry because they did what they were expected through their labors, but they were carrying the whole entire colony because others were not doing their bit. Unrest was breaking out. The colony knew that they did not, that if they did not do something about their situation fast, the colony was not going to survive. A new system was devised. William Bradford was on board the ship. He was a high-ranking guy. He wasn't the first governor. He was brought in the second governor. And he's like, hey, we need to do things differently. So the system that William Bradford came up with gave each pilgrim a parcel of land. They were told this land belonged to them. They could work the land as they pleased. The settlers would keep all they produced, and then they could bring any excess to market to trade with other settlers for goods they desired. This new system moved the colony away from the communal system they had been suffering under, and instead established a system that in today's world, once again, we call free market capitalism. And the Pilgrims' first corn harvest proved successful, and personal incentive and personal responsibility and self-sufficiency, that all took off. And because that all took off, the colony was not only prospering, their food became bountiful. They had so much food, they began to trade with the Indians. And Governor Bradford, wishing to give thanks to the Lord for their good fortune, organized a celebratory feast and invited their Indian allies, including the local tribe chief, and I'm not sure if this is the proper pronunciation, but I'll try it anyway, Massasoit. And the festival lasted for 3 days. And as I mentioned earlier, the menu was probably not what we would expect. It was rich in fowl and fish, and turkey was likely not one of the fowl. But nonetheless, it was a feast. And 5 deer were brought by the Indians also as a gift to the feast. And while turkey was not the main dish, it's possible some wild turkey or two may have been on the table. Pumpkin may have also been on the table, along with various berries. The Indians made a stewed mix of corn, roots, beans, squash, and various meats called soba heg. And on the table, there was also onions and turnips and greens, spinach, so on and so forth. Many of the menu items, it is suggested, were also prepared with traditional Native American spices and cooking methods because the Pilgrims had no oven and the Mayflower's sugar supply had dwindled. The meal did not feature pies or sweet cakes or other desserts. Because of the culture, it's also possible that the women did not participate. Now, in 1623, after a long drought had threatened the year's harvest, and yet still a bounty encouraged by their keep what you produce capitalistic system still made sure they had plenty of food still. Governor Bradford once again called for a feast for the purpose of giving thanks to the Lord for the survival and prosperity of the colony. And as the years progressed, a Thanksgiving feast on an annual or occasional basis became common practice in other New England settlements. During the American Revolution, the Continental Congress designated 1 or more days of Thanksgiving a year. And in 1789, George Washington issued the first Thanksgiving proclamation. And he had called upon Americans to express their gratitude, to give thanks to God, our Lord, for the happy conclusion to the country's war of independence and the successful ratification of the U.S. Constitution. And 2 of his successors, John Adams and James Madison, also designated days of thanks during their presidencies. In 1817, New York officially adopted an annual Thanksgiving holiday. In 1827, that's when Sarah Josepha Hale, who's known for her poem, her nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb, began to campaign to establish Thanksgiving as a national holiday, as I mentioned earlier, eventually achieving such. In 1863, at the height of the Civil War, when President Abraham Lincoln heard her cry and issued a proclamation entreating all Americans to ask God to commend to his tender care all those who have become widows, orphans, mourners, and sufferers in the lamentable civil strife, and to heal the wounds of the nation. And he scheduled Thanksgiving for the final Thursday in November. It was celebrated on that day until 1939, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt moved the holiday up a week in an attempt to spur retail sales during the Great Depression. Roosevelt's plan was met with passionate opposition, determined to keep with tradition. In 1941, the president reluctantly signed a bill making Thanksgiving the 4th Thursday in November. Now, turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberries or cranberry sauce, pies, while they were not on the original menu, over the passing of time, these menu items have become the traditional menu of Thanksgiving. The true essence of Thanksgiving, however, is not the meal. The unique American holiday was and still is a day for all of us to give thanks to God for our blessings and for the difficulties we have endured that have made us stronger and wiser. And the story I've given you may have not been technically the first Thanksgiving, for throughout the colonies, there were ceremonies of thanks that predate the Pilgrim celebration. But it was the one of the Pilgrims, by the Pilgrims, that has become, in a sense, the rallying cry for Thanksgiving, the example of Thanksgiving, because they were so emphatic about the fact that what it was all about was giving thanks to God. And despite the tales of bloody relationship between the Indians and the settlers, which I suppose did exist to some extent as the colonies began to encroach on native hunting grounds, the early tales of Thanksgiving reveals that there was a time when the Indians and the colonists existed in harmony and gave thanks to God for their relationship and the miraculous survival of the early colonists, and thanks to a little concept we now call today capitalism.
Wow. Never heard that.
It's I was thinking about that. The Indians and the settlers living in harmony, and statistics show us that the vast majority of the American slaughter of Indians happened post-Civil War, and that doesn't that coincides with Lincoln and the Republican Party, one-party rule for 40 years. They stopped being a federal republic and started becoming an empire. And it was only a matter of 2 or 3 decades when we started fighting foreign wars of adventure. And
it's when power became centralized to the federal government. You centralize power and people die.
Yeah, and it's exactly it. And the mercantilists of the day were the big railroad and steel barons, and they were hell bent on putting their railroad across the country, manifest destiny and all. And the Indians were getting in the way. So we had a whole bunch of Union soldiers just basically stayed in uniform after the surrender of the South and just started sweeping through. That's where the real tragedy came. But it's something that can't be laid at the feet of our founders at all. So.
And what's interesting is we have a society, a CRT-minded segment of our society that wants you to be convinced that those families who were simply just seeking a better life were massacres and murderers and and all sort of stuff. And a lot of people buy into that. Now, once again, we are not saying that human nature has not produced that kind of people in history. Absolutely. And that's unfortunate. But the founding of this country and the basis of what this country is all about is not that. The basis, the foundation is a biblical foundation, and a biblical foundation that began with and still includes a spirit of thanksgiving to the Lord. And I think that can't be emphasized enough.
Very good. I'm going to try to repeat that story on next Thursday, as close as I can come to it.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us, Doug. I heard that. So
I am in the purpose of writing it out as a presentation for tomorrow night at the Constitution Association monthly meeting. So what I'll do, Brady, for you is I will, once I'm finished writing it, send it to you so you can recite it.
That'd be great. I think, in fact, people I'm with next Thursday would probably enjoy this.
Okay, very good.
All right, Brady, you got 20 minutes. Park.
You want to go with what is it? FXT? So
I thought it was FTX.
FTX, yeah.
I know FXT sounds cooler, but it's FTX.
Well, it's gone now. It's gone bankrupt. For those who don't know, this was a crypto trading exchange, and their founder, Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried, otherwise known as SBF, was up to all kinds of shenanigans. Now that it's gone bankrupt and some of the stuff that's turning up, they brought in the A team of bankruptcy auditors, including Sullivan and Cromwell. And for those who don't know, when I saw that name, I go, okay, this is a cover-up. This is the cleaners. Sullivan and Cromwell was the law firm from the 1800s that basically was the first U.S. intelligence agency. It was Sullivan and Cromwell that basically did all the behind-the-scenes shenanigans that allowed us to annex Panama from Colombia so we could build the canal. They also did the espionage work preceding our invasions of Hawaii, Guam, and the Philippines. Sullivan and Cromwell had connections to about 2 out of every 3 secretaries of state for a 40-year period. Sullivan and Cromwell was at the table of the Treaty of Versailles as they made a situation where the Germany, post-World War I Germany, was going to be in a tough economic situation. And they did that so that their Wall Street their clients which are the wealthiest people on Wall Street, could go there and buy German assets on the cheap. These are the people who financed the Nazis. I call them the American fascists. Sullivan and Cromwell. This was Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles were Sullivan and Cromwell alumni. They were at the Treaty of Versailles. Well, they were also there at they invented the CIA. So, I mean, that's all connected. This goes. So when they're involved in this bankruptcy resettlement of FTX, you know that it's going to get interesting. The connections to FTX. Well, if you go all the way to the beginning, there's Bill Gates connections on the founding. Originally, this guy started 3 years ago with a bunch of mid-20 people that are a bunch of Harry Potter fans. They were all math majors, what have you. There's some Stanford stuff. There's a lot of ESG connections to some of their nonprofits. SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried's parents are both Stanford professors.
Yeah, and if I understand, they got huge Democrat Party connections.
Well, that's where it gets better. They do. His mom is the second biggest bundler of Democrat contributions.
Wow.
You want to know who else took a whole lot of money over the last year from SBX? Oh, yeah, because this is laundered money. This was ill-gotten gains. That would have been Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell. And McCarthy spent all that money he had basically running against America First candidates, pushing pro-establishment people. And the spending patterns, right? We've got all the spending and the donations. It's right there in front of us. That story broke today, and there's talk about McCarthy may get a little bit more heat about becoming Speaker of the House. So they were not just the Democrat givers; they were Republican, and they're doing this so they could buy off the regulators. His number two, this Carolyn, what's her name? Girl looks like a Harry Potter person. She can't even get a sentence out without giggling. She talks about how we don't use stop losses or we're a hedge fund trading. There's no serious person in the world would ever sit at a table with her and invest money, and they didn't until they opened an exchange. Well, it turns out her father used to work with Gary Gensler. Who's Gary Gensler? Well, he's the director of the SEC, who's supposed to be regulating cryptocurrencies. Now you're about to see the cryptocurrencies exchanges be regulated, and they need to be. Again, I work in this. I'm regulated by the SEC and FINRA. They do a good job for the most part. And if there wasn't regulation, it would be the Wild West, and no investor in the world could trust their money.
Right.
Because there are bad actors. Cryptocurrency is the Wild West, and these exchanges have almost no controls whatsoever. There's a reason you set your headquarters up in the Bahamas. Last story that broke was right before their bankruptcy. This guy, SBF, had back doors into the exchange so he could do trades and transfer money to other entities without anyone else at the firm knowing. And of course, he gave himself $1 billion loan from the hedge fund 2 hours before declaring bankruptcy. So that's there's a lot to this. And the connection, this story is a lot bigger than we thought when it first broke a week ago. And of course, the story breaks one day after the elections, instead of one day before.
Right.
So the timing is incredible. I could keep going on this subject. There's connections like you wouldn't believe. I think Gordon and I may do a show on that tomorrow. He's been doing a lot of digging. Gordon.
Yeah.
But that's the 30,000 foot view.
Have you had a chance to talk with what's his name, Alan? Right?
No, I have not.
Because he would know a lot about this stuff as well too, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I don't know how strong he is in crypto, but he's a forensic auditor. Forensic accountant. And that's pretty much what these bankruptcy lawyers are going there to do. They're trying to reconstruct the financial history of the company and try to get the creditors paid back. Now, one of the lead bankruptcy attorneys, there's a guy that worked on the Enron, and he wrote a sworn deposition in front of court, so he's telling the truth. Listen to the guy that worked on the Enron, and he said, I have never seen a company that was a bigger financial oversight mess in my life. He says it's the worst ever. And it's 60 pages of this guy's commentary, and I really should have brought it up on my screen to go through some of that stuff, but it is fascinating reading. And the fact is, you have people like Steph Curry and Tom Brady were, basically shareholders, and they were doing commercials to get people to invest in it. And the people who got ripped off are the everyday investors. the common people that were just putting their crypto
Right.
into an exchange. So this is basically the Democrat and Republican Party taking ill-gotten gains from basically stealing money from the individuals and to run their campaigns. Oh, forgot about the Ukrainian part of this.
Interesting. There's always a Ukrainian part in.
There's a Ukrainian tie into it. Oh, it's a good thing I'm sitting down.
Well, a lot of our aid money to the Ukraine that was not audited in any way, shape, or form, even though Rand Paul tried to get it audited. We're giving them $40 billion. We might want to find an idea where it goes. Well, it turns out some of that money went into the exchange and crypto and got laundered back to our politicians. Go figure. It's documented. You can't deny that this happened. They could see the campaign contributions. You see the sources.
Could this be a beginning of an end for certain things that we've been waiting for? Could this tie into maybe some of the investigations that we've been hoping for?
Well, it could be. It could be, but
I heard. And I don't remember where I heard it, but I believe that it's against some sort of regulation or rule or law to hide campaign contributions, like the people who gave to a particular politician. Is that correct?
Well, you have to have full disclosure of your contributions, but they've got, now that we've got the PACs and super PACs out there, it's the transparency's shot. The rules move.
And what happens too is if a contribution is lower than a certain amount, then you don't have to indicate who it came from. I think it's like less than $100 if it's $99 or less or something like that. So what you do if you're a large firm and you don't want anybody to know is you do like 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 $99 contributions.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, you speak about investigations. This kind of ties into what Doug asked. Obviously, we all know that Merrick Garland announced a special counsel to prosecute Donald Trump. And the word I probably should use is persecute, because there's no crime. They're just going to do.
They just don't want them to run because they know they're in trouble.
Well, that's actually not the reason for it, I don't think.
No,
because what's going to happen is basically, now the Republicans have the House. Jim Jordan's going to be in charge of the House Judiciary Committee, and he's going to have investigations into Russiagate, Spygate, all that kind of stuff, and January 6th. But now that there's a special counsel, what they're going to do is they're not going to give up any information, because everything's, you're going to be interfering with an ongoing criminal investigation. It's basically that special counsel is a cover-up, just like Mueller was. They're going to stonewall the congressional subpoenas and hide it behind ongoing investigations. Makes sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
They know there's no crime. But as long as they can have an ongoing investigation, they don't have to give up any information.
I got a little bit of a left field question, but I thought this was interesting that you said earlier, is that the Sullivan Cromwell, that they were the original intelligence. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, if you go even back to the Rothschild days, they always had great intelligence, and all these multinational corporations, whether it be a 1700s trading firm or a 19th century export or whatever, they always had to have really good intelligence. And a lot of the wars that were fought were basically to create commercial trade routes or beachheads. They used lawyers as their intelligence agents. You'd send a lawyer ahead of you into some port city, and he'd make all the contacts and negotiate deals ahead of time. That was intelligence work. This is clandestine operations. Well, that's what Sullivan and Cromwell was doing. They were functioning as an intelligence agency. They're lawyers, but they're not practicing law. If you're a lawyer, if you're a Wall Street lawyer, you should be practicing securities law, not going down to Panama and Colombia and basically partitioning off part of a sovereign nation. That's intelligence work.
Right.
So that's and again, it was these lawyers that started the OSS and the CIA. They were lawyers, and a lot of them were also Skull and Bones members.
Question: what was HW's original profession?
CIA.
Well, before that, wasn't he a lawyer at some point?
Did he go to law school? I don't remember. I couldn't swear by it.
He did, because Like, so the Sullivan Cromwell, how far did so that turned into the OSS? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's always been a revolving door.
Interesting. All right, I was just curious about that, and I figured other people would be curious about that as well. So I figured I would ask that question. But anyway, so more into the Trump allegations. For anyone who's not aware of it, can you kind of speak into what they're trying to charge or trying to get on, or how to put that? What are they trying to?
Yeah, they announced 2 investigations at this point. One is for insurrection of January 6th.
Okay.
And the other is for the documents from Mar-a-Lago saying he was stealing secrets. Now, the funny thing about that is it was just 2 days ago where the DOJ said, okay, we don't believe that they did anything criminal. It was basically just Trump's ego and he wanted memorabilia. And that was it. They actually announced this. And then 2 days later, you get a special counsel trying to make it into a criminal act. There's talk that, the Republican-led House can try to defund it. I don't think that's going to work. It's tomfoolery, shenanigans, all wrapped up into a ball.
Well, now, here's another question I have for you in regards to the CIA document or the classified documents. For one, I believe it was our own Douglas V. Gibbs that said that the president can disclose and have these said things. Is that correct, Doug?
Yeah, well, he can also declassify them and then have them.
Now, isn't it also? I heard this, and maybe y'all could speak to this as well. That that it's a requirement for a president after they serve in office for them to have a presidential library. Is that correct?
Not a requirement, but they tend to want to, and that's part of the reason. One of the reasons why they want their paperwork. Legacy, library. There's a number of reasons.
Now,
I mean, and really, if you're president of the United States, wouldn't you want to have records of all that time you were in? I mean, that's a pretty awesome thing, being president.
100%. Yeah, that's. Okay. I mean, basically, what I'm trying to get at is, to me, it seems like there's no case here, but it seems like
he's doing what every president's ever done. Hey, I want my paperwork.
Right, and it's. I guess my question is how come no one's sat here and no one's come to think that, like, hey, this is actually what every president has done. I mean,
because he's Trump.
Yeah, the National Records Archive trying to justifying a raid on a former president's house is unprecedented. It is so far beyond the pale of what's happened in the past that these people they don't care anymore. They understand. Look, when they raided Mar-a-Lago, they were going after the Spygate docs that Trump should have declassified, all of them, months ago, just like John Radcliffe said. And that's what they were trying to get. And remember that happened at the same time as the Trump-Clinton lawsuit was going on, which had just been dismissed. But at the end of the day, I would imagine be pretty foolish not to keep a copy of everything. Who knows?
I guess here's another question: is do you think he's saving it for something, or do you think he's just hanging on to it and they're just blowing it out of proportion? Why not disclose these things?
The answer might be yes and yes.
So
interesting.
You want to extrapolate on that before I give my answer?
Well, I'm just saying that, they're making a bigger thing than it is. But also, I wonder. I don't know because I'm not on the inside, and Brady probably has a few more tentacles into the information than I do because he's a great researcher. But from my point of view, it would be foolish on his part if he had things that could maybe partially vindicate and not make sure he had his hands on it or have it. And that gets back to what he's saying earlier about them trying to get some of the Spygate, data or information because they know that.
Yeah, the thing you got to keep your eye on is John Durham. Now, Durham may or may not be done with his prosecutions. He hasn't given an indication one way or the other. There's a case to be made for both. His next order of business would be going after actual FBI guys, and that could be on the table. There's also a couple of people named in the Danchenko trial that some people that helped with the dossier and helped finance it, the Clinton associated people. But if he doesn't do any more investigations, he folds up shop. He's getting pressured by Merrick Garland. He's got to issue a report. Now that's probably pretty close to being finished. He's got to delay that report until January 3rd, because then you have the Republicans in charge of the House. Why is that important? Because Merrick Garland can basically censor anything he puts in the report. Nothing gets public without him. There's a caveat in the special counsel provisions or rules that allows the special prosecutor, Durham, to challenge the Attorney General, and he does that by reporting to the Senate, the House Judiciary Committee. So he has to wait for the Republicans to be in charge.
Now that thing though, if you have wolves in sheep's clothing, how would that make a difference? Because obviously, you know, a lot of the Republicans are basically just Democrats. They're just, you know.
Yeah, and as Warhamster put out to a bunch of friends, they were doing what they could to keep conservatives that might interfere with their establishment ways out.
Yeah, that's absolutely, and that was that ties into the FTX. That was the money they were using to do it. So it's one big interconnected shit show. Excuse my language. Jim Jordan should be the chair of the House committee. He's been pretty good on these committees so far. I'm not ready to trust him 100% because he took an awful lot of money from Google, and he has not been that good on the big tech censorship issue. Right. So he's not 100% trustworthy at this point in time.
But considering what we've got, he's probably one of the better ones.
He is. Andrew, what do you got? A Slurpee there? You got 7-Eleven?
Really, maybe they'll sponsor me in the future. Circle K Polar Pop. I'm just.
Hey, all I know is those cups keep it cold like forever.
Well, actually, it stays cold longer according to them as well. So that's, I guess, documented now.
Oh yeah. It's like the styrofoam. The thing that they all want to get rid of because it's horrible for the environment.
Yeah.
Keeps it cold forever.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. If it kept it cold forever, that'd be amazing. But I'm lucky if the thing even stays cold for another hour. So.
Is it still hot? Is it still hot down there?
It's in the 70s. It's where most of America is covered in snow. I was actually sweating today. So,
as I like to tell people, the wonderful thing about places like Minnesota, they don't just measure their snow in inches; they measure it in feet. Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, actually, I saw a picture of the Buffalo Bills stadium, and it was hugely stacked, all up in the bleachers and everything like that. And I'm just like, I don't think that you could pay me to ever go to a place like that. Not even to visit. I'm good. Like I'd be like the Jamaicans from Cool Runnings. I'd be like Sanka. I'd be like, I'm good. I'll just.
Yeah. No, I love that scene. It says, "Hey man, what are you smoking?" He says, "I'm not smoking. I'm breathing."
Yeah. That's a great.
I've become a warm weather guy, but I did live in Lake Tahoe for 3 years as a ski bum, so I did like the snow at one point in time. But I think I'm getting a little soft as I get older.
All right, now we've gotten off of our beaten path as political pundits here, so get back on target here.
And we turned into weathermen.
Yeah.
I'd like to shift a little bit towards, since we spoke about Ukraine. It seems like from what I've gathered, with Russia and Ukraine, that there's still maybe some nuclear threats. As I understand, because from what I understand, they found a tactical ballistic nuclear. I don't know if it was just a singular missile or multiple, but it was inside a plane at an airport in Ukraine, and I think Putin was going to use that as a reason to maybe flex Russia's nuclear armaments. Do you have anything on that, Brady?
That's the first I've heard of this one.
Yeah, that's new to me too.
I've not gone deep into that, but because right now I'm really big into nuclear things right now, trying to understand that. In fact, I've been trying to get in contact with Bob Lazar about having him on the show sometime for nuclear things. Just because, yes, He was the Area 51 guy, yes, all that stuff. He doesn't really like interviews, but I'm hoping that he'll do something as far as nuclear, because he has a company called United Nuclear. And I believe he moved it to Oregon. But basically, he does contracts for the government. He has his own particle accelerator. I believe he's also working on hydrogen cars. He's been doing that for decades.
Interesting.
Good luck getting Bob Lazard on any kind of show. It took Joe Rogan 2 years to get him to agree to a show. He's that man is shy.
But here's the thing, though: no one ever wants to talk to him about aliens, but no one ever wants to talk to him about what he actually does. So I got an angle there, so I'm gonna try. But it seems like more and more it's like we're getting back into the Cold War. It just.
Well, yeah, that's actually a good segue into the big story I have for Ukraine, and that's it is Cold War type stuff. So earlier this week, we find out that we're here from the U.S. intelligence or the U.S. National Security Council gives out a report from an anonymous person that a Russian missile hit 2 people in Poland. And you got people like Twitter is all banging the drums for World War III because you got to invoke Article 5. Russia attacked, a NATO ally. You can automatically invoke Article 5, which means we have to come to their defense, and World War III is on. Jack Posobiec, who's usually good on most things, because he's Polish, was banging the war drums for a whole day. And I'm sitting there on my social media saying, shouldn't we find out actually where that missile came from? Because we knew right away that it was an S-300 missile. So I get on my little Google machine. I find out that the S-300 anti-aircraft missile has a range of 150 kilometers. So I go look at a map, and it turns out there's not a Russian, any kind of Russian forces within 900 kilometers of where that missile hit. So the logic of me says, gee, that's probably a Ukrainian anti-aircraft missile, whether intentionally or unintentionally shot. And that's what it turned out to be 8 hours later. It's confirmed. Yeah. It was amazing how we found out about that. It was just somebody took a picture of it in Poland, and it gets out to social media, and this super sleuths of the internet that we have, the free internet, basically identified from serial numbers and everything like that exactly what batch, lot, and everything it came from. Wow. And so they're coming back and they're saying, well, Russia was attacking Ukraine, and Ukraine's fired anti-aircraft or anti-missiles, and so it's still Russia's fault. Doesn't quite work that way. But the part that I really enjoyed was Zelensky, even 24 hours after we knew that it was a Ukrainian missile, it was still screaming about World War III, trying to say, no, it was Russian, and we already knew it wasn't. So Zelensky lost an awful lot of credibility from some of his previous supporters for the fact that he wouldn't face reality and was still trying to blame it on Russia for a full day after we knew the truth. And that's happened the same week this FTX blow up comes out. And all that money, all that money laundering, crypto that they were doing, yeah. So Ukraine's dealing with a much weaker hand than they were a week ago.
Doug, do you have anything on
that? I don't, but I had a conversation with a woman who was born and raised in the Ukraine when it was under communist rule, and I'm amazed at how the Ukrainian people hold Zelensky up in such a high pedestal. He's, according to her, their version of Trump. And he's not a good guy.
Oh, God, no.
And it amazes me. And, when you say, oh, God, no, Brady, please elaborate.
Oh, well, first of all, he's an actor So Zelensky's an actor for a TV station, and he played the role of a president. The TV station is owned by Ihor Kolomoisky, who's one of the 2 or 3 richest oligarchs in Ukraine. Ihor Kolomoisky used to own a company called Burisma, which is where Hunter Biden worked, which is the reason Biden threatened to fire the prosecutor because they were looking into it, which is why they impeached Trump. So Kolomoisky is part of all of this. Kolomoisky also owned a bank in the Ukraine called Privat Bank. So when our USAID money, which is in the billions from 2014 on, gets sent to Ukraine, it gets deposited at Privat Bank. And they're supposed to lend it out to Ukrainian businesses. That's how that works. Well, Kolomoisky was actually lending the money to his own companies. That money would then get transferred to Cyprus, and then somehow would make it to the United States. And now Ihor Kolomoisky owns 50% of the skyline in Cleveland, Ohio, and 40% of the skyline in Louisville, Kentucky. Now, Ihor Kolomoisky himself was not allowed to set foot in the United States, but he owns parts, real estate all over the place. So, as part of our, it's really complex because it was Victoria Nuland in the U.S. State Department that overthrew the staged the Maiden Revolution in 2014. They got rid of the pro-Russian prime minister who had just backed out of deals with the EU to sign pro-Russia deals. That's why they overthrew him, and they installed Poroshenko. Poroshenko, worked with some of the State Department's anti-corruption efforts, actually nationalized Privat Bank in 2016. So Kolomoisky lost his bank because he was too dirty, even for our tastes. That's why he ran Zelensky, is so he'd get his bank back, and that's what Zelensky was working on. That's the connection there. It's all about Ihor Kolomoisky. Now, Ihor Kolomoisky is a Jewish oligarch who is not welcomed in Israel very much. In fact, he's got Jewish organizations in Europe that run against the Israeli organizations. They butt heads all the time. So, and it's interesting that this is the guy financing Nazi battalions. So when you think about fascism, everyone always assumes it means anti-Semitic. It's not. Nazism or fascism could be, they could pick any target. It's not just pro-Jewish or anti-Jewish.
It's not about that. It's about what makes up. I mean, it's basically just another type of socialism is all it is. But rather than the system owning everything, it does it through heavy regulation, all that. That's the governmental version of fascism, and those who support that kind of control, that kind of dictatorship, authoritarianism would be then fascist. But it's the other, of course, misnomer is that it's a right-wing idea, and it's not. It's to the far left. It's no different than socialism, communism, in the sense of totalitarianism.
Well, I would add to your description and say what it really is. It's about corporate control of the government.
Sure.
And that's basically mercantilism. It's also, basically what we have here in the United States right this minute.
And what the founding fathers are fighting against early on.
Well, that's basically the theme of my entire book. So, called "Those Who Rule Over You." It's these international corporations, these different coalitions, and basically how they influence control over the government and the appearance of self-determination. Since this is a constitutional show, I'm gonna go off on a little tangent here, and I'm gonna steal one of Brian McClanahan's terms. He calls it proposition nation, where the statists or the leftists or whoever you want to call these people who we're up against, they say that the proposition of the United States is that all men are created equal, and that's not the case. Because if that's the number one priority of creating everyone equal, that's their excuse to socialism. Because it's all about how you define equality.
Well, you got to eliminate the word "created" for them.
Well, there you go. So they'll say all men are equal, but then they switch it to equity. This nation was nation was founded on some very basic principles, and number one of them was individual liberty, and self-determination. And self-determination assumes self-governance, which means you have representative government. That's the opposite of what we have today. We are ruled. We are ruled by two national political parties. Those national political parties are controlled by multinational corporations like FTX, who can spend as much money as they want to swing elections. That is not a democratic process. That is a democracy, unfortunately, because that's what democracy always ends up being, is an oligarchy. Always. So basically right now, the government we're living under, it's an oligarchy, it's fascist, it's everything we weren't supposed to be. And to get back to individual liberty and self-determination, which are the real founding principles of this country.
I would agree with that, except for I would put one thing in front of individual liberty. And it's in the pledge amongst the founding fathers, divine providence. The number one pillar, or the number one cog that Doug always talks about, the number one cog that restores a republic. But not just
individual liberty doesn't happen if you're not a virtuous society, and you're a virtuous society if you have a biblical foundation.
Yeah.
There you go.
That was good. That was good teamwork right there. All three of us. Nice job.
Yeah. I would say high five, but then we just block each other, so it would not work. But anyways, all right. So we got about a minute left. So we're gonna close up the show by everybody kind of seeing where they could find you. So Doug, if you could please tell people where they could find you, and then Brady, and then I'll end it with mine.
All right, DouglasVGibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com. Join my email list. You go to politicalpistachio.com. On the right-hand side, there's a sidebar. Go down, and where it says join the email list, click that, and you can join the email list. I've been getting back into videos. I've got some good ones out there. Go to Douglas V. Gibbs. Back up, youtube.com/Douglas V. Gibbs. I also put the videos at Rumble and Brighteon and BitChute, Douglas V. Gibbs being the key term there. And if you're on my email list, you don't even have to remember to look. I'll send you an email telling you about it.
Oh, how convenient. Brady?
Well, as of right now, I haven't been putting out much content the last couple of months. That's about to change. My channels on Rumble and Odyssey are Warhamster or War_Hamster. Keep an eye out. I'm going to be launching a new channel called Hamster Tales. Reason I'm doing that is I'm kind of changing my focus. Basically, I want to start directing my message towards people who don't already see the world the way we do, a more professional class. I want to change some minds. And I feel like I was talking to an echo chamber a bit, even though I like the people that agree with me already. I want to change my target audience a bit, and I'm going to work on. I'm just coming from a little bit different angle, trying to do some, drop some fact bombs, and that's coming very soon. So I will make that announcement soon.
All right.
Well, Hamster Tales. I like the marketing angle there. That sounds very cool. I like that.
Well, I just got the approval from Tracy, so that's it. That's official. It'll be there.
Okay, very cool.
You also have a Twitter? Did you mention that?
I am on Twitter under Warhamster7. It's at War_Hamster1776. You want to see my best material, though, you go to patriots.win, and I'm there as War_Hamster, and I am there debating, changing minds, and all day, pretty much off and on just about every day. That's my true home on the internet is patriots.win. I think there's some of the sharpest minds on the internet on that site. I learn there and I teach there, so it's a great place.
Now, could you help people out and maybe put a link in Twitter so they could go to your Twitter? They'll hopefully follow you and then go to Patriot Win, where you said all that content would be. And then as for me, obviously, if you're here, you're here. And thank you. I'm also on Twitter, the Citizen 1776. And then I am on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook just because I don't want to really waste my time there.
Yeah.
So
I'm there, but I'm not there often. And when I do show up, they cancel me out for like a month. So it's really weird.
Yeah,
I left Facebook 2 years ago when they were sharing all of my information with China. So that was it. I made my announcement, said, "Hey guys, I'm out of here in 10 days. If anybody who wants to give me your information so we can stay in touch offline, do it now, because I am killing the channel and I have not been back."
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody that did show up, and I appreciate our guests here that come every week. We may or may not have a show next week. I'll tell you what, if you go to my Twitter or my Instagram, you may find out there. If not, well, then I guess you may see us or you may not. It's unfortunate, but that's how it goes. Anyway, Douglas V. Gibbs, close us out, please.
United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.